Hello everyone and welcome to my review of the 4th episode from The Witcher show on Netflix. If you've missed any of the previous ones, there's a link to the full playlist down in the description. Also, there will be major spoilers, so beware. With that said, let me tell you what I thought about pretty much everything in this episode, the name of which is Of Banquets, Bastards and Burials. First off, Ciri arrives in Brokilon and immediately stumbles upon the Dryads, which seem like a tribe of women who live in the forest, and I can already hear a million voices screaming in terror of how they got the Dryads wrong. Well, there is some truth to that. The Dryads in the books were forest nymphs of sorts. Their skin and eyes and even smell weren't quite human. They were a little more mystical, I suppose, and that is true especially for their leader, Aithne. I think this is supposed to be her. They never use that name, but I'm fairly convinced it's her. They also had this magic water which allowed them to create more of their kind, and they do have the water here too, but it's been changed as well. Also, their primary weapons were bows. Here we do have one crossbow, but everyone else is using spears. And I actually suspect that they may have changed that later in production, because listen to this. Or rather, read this.
Don't hurt me.
Keep your aim true. Sounds like something you would tell people who are using ranged weapons as opposed to spears, to me at least. So I theorize that the show was originally written with the intent for the Dryads to use bows, but later they thought spears are cooler or something and changed them. Anyway, then we move on to Geralt and Dandelion, and once again it's a great scene.
Teeny weeny little feather.
Fuck off, bud.
The part where they all start singing when Geralt got paid strikes me as a little corny and exaggerated, although it's true that Geralt was indeed very popularized by Dandelion's songs. So, for a lack of a better way to show it, I'm fine with it. Then Geralt gets a bath and talks about how he needs no one. That, of course, is to be contrasted with what's coming later on in the episode. And there goes the handsome young Emhyr again. I really like the actor they chose to play him. I wonder if anything out of the ordinary happens to him later on in the show.
Why are you dressed like a sad silk trader?
There's a little nod here to him being a druid.
Been advising the Skeleton Crown for years. It's had rough around the edges, but they're off the earth. Like me.
Old and crusty.
I appreciate it. Anyway, we move back to Ciri and Dara in Brokilon, and here's yet another example of, I'm not sure if I should call it bad pacing, probably not. I suppose it's just stuffing the scene with too many things at once. So we have this conversation between the two of them that is 90 seconds long, where Ciri decides to reveal her true identity to him, who she is, where she's from, and who is really after her. Then he realizes who her grandmother was and that she slaughtered his family and killed and raped his people, or rather her men did. Also, he regrets hiding and seemingly blames himself for what happened to his loved ones. He then wishes he could forget who he was, but Ciri apparently doesn't wish to forget and says she needs to find her destiny. Then he questions her motivation, and then we're back to Geralt and Dandelion. So we had all of that in such a short amount of time, and I was like, hold on a moment, can we let these things breathe a little bit? You know, let us delve a little deeper into what's going on with these characters, Dara and Ciri, but oh well. Also, one more thing, Dara's description of what the humans did to his people is just a little too much, in my opinion. He talks about Calanthe's men killing and raping the elves, and then, correct me if I don't understand it properly, but I think he says that they were laughing the most when they held the elven babies by the legs, swinging them around and smashing their heads.
They laughed the hardest when they were swinging babies from their legs, smashing their heads in.
I mean, okay, I know that there is some serious and well-established hate towards non-humans in the world of The Witcher, but this just seems unnecessarily and overly sadistic for no good reason. Not to mention that it also comes across as incredibly one-sided.
If you leave the cemetery, I shall set them free. They will fight at your side. If not, I shall kill them, here and now.
Milady, don't listen to him. He can't be trusted.
I accept your conditions.
Your Grace, I beg you.
Eldane clasped his hands in thanks. Then, in a swift, almost careless movement, slit the throat of the scout standing nearest to him.
You should have listened to Rayla, Your Grace. We elves truly cannot be trusted.
Next up, there's a rather flirtatious scene between Calanthe and Geralt.
I can't help you.
So perilously direct. As queen, I could command it.
If I were one of your subjects.
I could torture you so very slowly into compliance.
Then we have a poor Nilfgaardian guy. And then poor Queen Callis.
Poor Queen Callis.
So Yennefer is bored as hell, and the queen goes from "my husband only cares that I give him a child" to the much more general "people look at me not for who I am, but for what I can give to them." Anyway, this scene is interrupted by stabbing and screaming, and holy mother Melitele, everyone is dead, and this beastmaster, assassin, sorcerer type is suddenly after them. Then somehow Yennefer knows that he was sent by the king to kill his wife because she couldn't give him a boy. I mean, I guess she knows a lot about what's going on at court, so I'll believe it. So they run and scream and keep running, and suddenly the queen looks at Yen and says,
Get up, you useless witch.
and I thought she was actually in league with the assassin and they were really after Yennefer. But then he shows up and she keeps screaming, and it turns out I was wrong, and I guess Yennefer's like, well, I ain't gonna protect someone who calls me that, and leaves.
You horrible useless bitch!
Okay, back at Sintra, or should I say forward at Sintra, Dandelion is killing it as usual.
To hope on my home as it rises in the morn.
I already talked about Dandelion's songs in a previous episode, but I gotta say it again, they're some of the best parts of The Witcher show. I wasn't quite sure about the actor, but now that I see him in action, he's awesome. Then the queen says,
All this because male tradition demands it. If I were a man, I could simply tell the whole lot of them to f*** off, declare outright who Bavetta should marry, and have done with it. Better yet, let the poor girl decide her own fate.
And I'm not sure about these lines. I mean, she is one of the most, if not the most powerful individual we've seen in the show so far. She's queen, ruler of her country, leader of her people. She seems to be as good a fighter as any man. She commands and leads her army into battle. They follow her to their deaths if they have to. She can more or less behave however she wishes, say whatever she wishes. And with all that said, I have a hard time believing that if she says, my daughter's gonna marry this guy, her followers would suddenly object and be like, wait, that we cannot abide. Although I must admit that these are people who believe in things like destiny and the law of surprise, so who knows?
It's not a fair bet. That red-headed scandal out over there, Crack and Crate, will marry Bavetta.
And speaking of that, good old Emhyr appears. Well, he's quite young here and cursed. They try to have him killed, but thanks to Geralt, a righteous brawl erupts, and we're back to the poor queen. She gets killed, but then Yennefer comes back to save the baby, I think, or maybe changes her mind, but it's too late. Anyway, she comes back, she destroys the beast, but is still unable to overpower the assassin, so she runs away with the baby, and somehow it dies. Are we meant to believe that this knife managed to go clean through Yennefer's shoulder area and killed the baby on the other side? Anyway, then we go back to Geralt for more Destiny, Children of Destiny, Wives of Destiny, and I think in the books it wasn't the Queen who tries to kill him in the end, though I could be wrong, and also Winds Howling. We see some of Ciri's powers manifesting in her mother. Geralt drinks a Sign Intensity potion, and with a little help from Ermion, he saves the day, and Calanthe now believes in Destiny. And by the way, in case anyone's wondering, the whole Destiny talk is fairly book accurate. It may seem a little extra annoying in the show, simply because the books take more time and it feels a little more spaced out there, but it's true. And as for the scene itself, I kinda liked it. I think I even enjoyed it better than the Striga fight. I liked the music, and it was quite intense, certainly a much better scene than what's coming next. Because then, Yennefer has this monologue/dialogue with the dead baby, which ends with her telling it how fortunate it is to have died rather than living life as a girl.
And let's face it,
You're a girl. We're just vessels. And even when we're told we're special, as I was, we're still just vessels for them to take and take until we're empty and alone. So count yourself lucky.
Where do we begin? She's had quite the troublesome past, but is the root cause of all her problems truly the fact that she's a woman? I'm not convinced at all. In fact, I can hardly think of a single problem she's had that was specifically because of her gender. So yeah, I don't think her character has any personal motivation to say any of that. Sure, maybe she regrets the decisions she made, which led to her being bored by politics for 30 years, but hardly that is worse than death. I'm not even sure if she has a good reason to say this in general. You know, the world of The Witcher is not a pretty place by any means, but it's hardly that much worse for women. And let's not forget that the books, on which this show is almost literally based on, are absolutely full of powerful female characters. Just look at how many sorceresses you have. These are women with great personal power, political influence, inhuman beauty, the ability to have nearly any man or woman they want, and on top of that they're basically immortal. Then you have queens like Calanthe and even more so Meve, who seems to be no less of a ruler or military leader or fighter than any male king. There's also Rayla and Renfri and Milva and so on and so forth, but no, apparently death is preferable to being a woman in this world. Anyway, a destiny has been fulfilled and Emhyr is no longer a hedgehog, and more importantly, Geralt now has a child surprise as well.
Are you?
Fuck.
Luckily he doesn't have to marry it to fulfill that destiny. We then have some more destiny talk, and we cut to Fringilla Vigo after the fall of Sintra, where she has her colleague cut out a piece of Calanthe's dead skin and eat it. Then she cuts him open, touches the piece of skin inside his intestines, I think, and figures out that Ciri is in Brokilon. And on that cheerful note, I think we should end this video. Although, you know what, let's talk a little bit about Fringilla. The show seems to be trying to portray her as a villain. While in the books she may not have been the most moral person, I do not recall her actually being malicious and resorting to such types of magic involving somewhat occult elements and, more importantly, sacrificing her fellow mages along the way. And we'll get to that later, but she actually does it again before the end of the show in the very last episode. I find it somewhat ironic that I made a few videos prior to the release of the show theorizing how they'll get her appearance wrong, but it turns out it may be deeper than that. I must say that this one was either my least favorite or my second least favorite episode of the entire show. However, tell me what you thought of it and about everything I said. Thank you very much for watching, special thanks to my supporters on Patreon and YouTube members, and until the review of episode 5, stay tuned and be good.